Well, Biden and Kamala are pushing through sweeping gun legislation right before Hurricane Helene made landfall, interestingly enough, but also before the election, because if they are voted out here in November, they want to make sure that they've made one more lasting impact on you and your ability to own firearms. Now, there's a lot here that we could dive into, but the one I want to focus on today is actually the gun confiscation part that nobody is really talking about, or not a lot of people are talking about. But of course, I want to bring this to light, and so that way you are better informed. If you care about firearms, the Second Amendment at all, this is something you should definitely know, because this is something that could be carried forward for, God forbid, 4 years, or even worse, 8 years into the future, depending on if Kamala is actually elected or not. So, of course, I want to break this down for you, and I want your opinion. If you agree, disagree, whatever, leave me your opinion down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. Now, this executive order has a lot attached to it, and we're going to focus on the gun confiscation. But just to give you an idea, they're looking at creating a new task force to look into so-called ghost guns and 3D printing. And then, of course, there's the enhanced background checks for anybody under 21. But then there's the gun confiscation part of that that's attached. And they're doing this in a number of different ways. The first one is like $135 million that will be allotted based on whatever kind of formula they use to 48 states, where they can then implement their procedures to put red flag laws into place. Right now, 21 states have red flag laws, but if they can offer up some money for, personnel and whatever else, then maybe they can coerce other states to kind of opt into this. Now, the DOJ is actually making this model to give to states where essentially, in their words, they can carve out juvenile records and essentially giving information to states that will let them know if it will kind of go against any kind of privacy laws, and basically what the states can do and what they can't do to get the information they seek in these enhanced background checks.
Come on.
Now, this whole carve out information, they essentially want to pry to get as much information as they can on these 18 to 21 year olds. That's the first part of the problem. Now, of course, you could look at it from another way, and you could say, hey, we don't want juveniles or young adults that were juveniles that had an extensive criminal history when they were a kid and then buying a gun as soon as they're 18. And in those cases, I think everybody would pretty much agree that you don't want to give somebody that has a known history of violence a firearm just a year later. Now, we've seen instances, especially where parents are failing these kids in a lot of ways in giving them access to guns when they shouldn't have access, right? That's what we saw in Georgia. But at the end of the day, they're trying to restrict 18 to 21 year olds by saying, hey, we're going to go through all of your records, and we're basically going to stop at nothing to make sure that those records are available to us. So if we see anything that's risky, we can deny you. Now, I think I speak for pretty much everybody that says, hey, if you have a juvenile that has this extensive criminal history, all the way up until, 15, 16, 17, they turn 18, they want to buy a gun. Is that the best choice? Well, maybe not, right? If they have a violent history as a juvenile, chances are they may be violent with that gun afterwards. Now, of course, it's kind of a slippery slope, right? If somebody pays their dues to society, right? They go to prison, they get out. I believe those people, if you let them out, right? You trust them to go into society again. You think they've been reformed, they should get all of their rights back. The doctors, right? We're going to incentivize the doctors to make sure that they are preaching to parents about firearm safety and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to incentivize the states by paying $135 million based on a formula to make sure they put in red flag laws. We're also going to give models to the states to say, hey, this is how we're doing it, and this is how you could do it. And also tell those states what they can or cannot do. And then that comes back to the 18-year-old that's trying to buy their first firearm. What information there is going to deny them? What information there is going to allow them to buy that firearm? If they have a simple possession, right, as a teenager, does that stop them from buying a firearm now? Are they reformed enough then? What about these privacy laws that they want to carve out and essentially give them an opening to release this information when otherwise it should be kept private? Now, they say it's only going to be for enhanced background checks, but does anybody really trust them when it comes to that? I know I don't.
Oh, come on, man.
Now, they've boasted that they've had 20% more denials since this has gone into place, since the enhanced background checks. Something like 900 people have been denied. Well, if you look at statistics, out of those 900 people, there's no freaking way that all 900 of them would have committed some kind of crime. There's just, it's statistically impossible, because we know that a very small percentage of people actually carry out things like, these mass tragedy events. And I mean, it doesn't happen as much as the media tries to portray. So you're talking already about a very small percentage of people. You're talking about, 3% of crimes, right? Crimes that involve guns in the United States are used with all kinds of rifles. And you're talking about an even smaller percentage of those 18 to 21-year-olds that are actually going to do anything but go target shooting or go deer hunting or just want that gun in their home for protection. It's essentially saying that 18 to 21-year-olds can't be trusted. Well, if they can't be trusted and you say, they're not quite adults yet, or, statistically we think they may do something, well then at what point do we actually call them adults? Does that need to be raised to 21? Does it need to be raised to 25 when the frontal cortex is actually fully developed? At what point do we say, hey, you're an adult now, so these constitutional rights are afforded to you and you can utilize them? How many kids, how many of us, right, did something so stupid in our childhood? Maybe you never got caught for it. A lot of us don't, right? But if you would that prevent you from buying a firearm? And then for how long, right? If I get denied when I turn 18 because I had some silly charge when I was a juvenile, how long will that prohibit me? Until I'm 22? Or in another year? Or how long does this process last? It's just another way to restrict adults from getting firearms. And if this could be passed, maybe they increase the age. But here's the part that is truly scary. Let's say they do that enhanced background check. They find something they deem makes you some type of threat or a person in crisis. They can then enact red flag laws to take your current firearms away from you. What are these things that they find in your juvenile or mental health records that would say, hey, you're unable to own a firearm and we're going to take these from you? What constitutes that? Somebody with anxiety? Somebody that's battled and overcome depression? How many juveniles have, kind of rough goings of it when they're coming up, but then become incredible adults and do incredible things in their lives?
Come on, folks.
This is like backdoor gun confiscation. This is a way for them to say, without clear language like it always is, that, hey, we think you're actually a threat because I see that you were actually put on a medication for anxiety or for depression, and I think that you may be, in crisis mode right now, so we're just going to pull all of your guns from you. Maybe you get them back in a year unless the court extends it. You're preemptively saying that these people are criminals before they do anything. Do you see the problem? There's people that go their entire lives, no criminal history whatsoever, and then they do something heinous. You cannot predict that. Now again, I'm not saying that a juvenile that has an extensive criminal history, or anybody for that matter, they have an extensive violent past, letting them buy a firearm is silly. But how often are those people actually going through the legal means to get this firearm? Well, maybe not as much as you think. We're telling these same 18 to 21-year-olds, hey, you can go fight for your country, potentially lose your life there, but when you come back, you can't own this handgun, but maybe you can own this rifle only if you pass this enhanced background check. So they've created this loop between the states and incentivizing this, the doctors to make sure that, they don't violate HIPAA laws if they have an ERPO order, right? And they can release this information, trying to get additional information and carving out ways to get that information to the enhanced background check, and topping that off with a red flag law that can potentially take firearms away from 18 to 21-year-olds. If you don't trust that 18 to 21-year-olds are responsible enough to be gun owners, do you raise the age then? I don't know, to 25? Is 21 now an adult, right? At some point, you have to draw a line and you have to say, hey, at this point, these constitutional rights are afforded to you. And unfortunately, Biden and Harris are trying to restrict those rights. So there you go. That's just my opinion, though, and I'd love to hear yours. No matter if you agree or disagree, let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.